Good evening, hello everybody, and welcome to the show this evening on this lovely, quite warm day, isn't it? So it's only a bit warm here in the studio, that's for sure. So welcome to our open door show. I'm sure some of you might be completely new, but if you are, my name's Ritchie, and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all very well.
Good stuff, guys. It's great to have you here. And just in case this is your first time, with us, then what have you let yourself in for? What's in store for you this evening? Well, 45 minutes of non-stop positivity, all upbeat, everything nice and energetic to do with property development. Isn't that right, Ian? All around property development this evening.
It certainly is. So basically, Ritchie and I run a company called propertyCEO, and our day job is training people how to become successful, small-scale property developers. And of course, many people quite like the idea of developing property, but they worry that it's going to be too complex, too risky, too complicated. So basically, our job is to give them the support and the training that they need to be able to do it safely and as successfully as possible. But we also think that right now, there's this amazing opportunity that's lying just around the corner, which is going to create a lot of wealth for developers. So we wanted to help people find out all about that and, of course, to see if development might be a good fit for them. Isn't that right?
It certainly is, and it's all going on out there in the world, isn't it? We're about to enter a recession, so don't worry about that. That's fine, off the back of a global pandemic, and then we have Brexit before that. But look, these things, recessions, Brexit, all these things create opportunities for development. And at the moment, there's a set of circumstances like no other. Probably I won't ever see these circumstances again in my lifetime. Not because I'm old, just because I don't think they're going to come around again for a while in terms of the opportunities out there. And it's those that seek those opportunities out that go and grab them rather than sort of follow the crowds that are going to win. So as always, this show serves up lots of predictions, advice, occasionally guests. We've got a guest coming up on Saturday. We'll tell you about that a little bit later. But above all, we're going to be having a bit of fun. We're happy to take questions, no show. Well, mind you, we have got something to start with today. I want to quiz Ian on a couple of things. But please do put your questions in the chat box. Now, just give me a quick wave of hands to tell me if you can see and hear us. Can you? Yes, you can. That's good, because someone has said, Dom has said, can't see you. Having said that, a white screen might be seen by some as improvement. That's not very nice, is it, Dom? Dom and Alison saying if they had a completely white screen, that would be better. Dom and Alison, let me drop the hands. Thank you, everyone. Can you see us now? Just give me a hands up, Dom. Just Dom and Alison, can you see and hear us? They don't even know to put hands up. They're unbelievable. No, they said. Well, they can hear us. Everyone else can see us, Dom. So it's just you tonight. You're going to have to do something about that. Anyway, good evening to all you folks on board. Obviously, we've got a lot of the usual crowd, and it looks like some different people as well. So Jane's on, Mikhail's on, Clive's on, Dom and Alison are on, Richard's on, Ranjit's on from Property Investor News. Hello, Ranjit, how are you from Property Investor News? Deb's and Rich is on, Gavin's on, another Dom's on, Dominic, Yvonne's on, Michael's on, Jennifer's on, Edward's on, VJ's on, Josh is on, Adir's on, Pete's on, Stephen's on, Sarah on, Harjinder, Will, Helen, Dan, Karen, Mike, etc., Jackie, Sammy, you're all on. Good evening, welcome, thanks for coming on board. And if I don't mention your name, I do apologise. I got through quite a lot there, and a few of them are saying on there, please tell me, will you give us a certificate? I'm not sure what that's about. McCall says no audio comes to me. Well, hopefully you've got audio, because other people have. McCall, give me a hands up. Can you hear us? Let's just get a couple of technicalities out of the way. Can you hear us, McCall? Not Clive. Clive, put your hand down. And Michael. Yes, he can. That's great. That's great. Good stuff. And what was his next question? He says, can't see Ian, says Clive. Well, there's not a thing. You should be able to see Ian.
Let's be honest. So you're...
Edward says, hi, guys.
The subscription model to Open Door, where you can choose who you don't see. And Dominic and Alison, frankly, have got the full-blown one where you don't get to see either of us.
Yeah, sometimes, guys, if you're listening to on mobile, you don't always pick up two images. We've heard that. So you want to be on desktop for some reason. Mikhail, I'm not sure what your question is. Please tell me, will you give us e-certificate? Not sure what that is, but put another comment in there and we can follow that one up. So, guys, welcome. Thanks for having you all on board. So a couple of things. First of all, an announcement. There was an interesting announcement this week from the government to do with planning. New plans to get Britain building in coronavirus recovery. So that's interesting, and it's all about planning. A couple of things out there. So you should, if you've got a planning consultant, touch base with them. They should be giving you this information in a bit more detail. We're just going to give you a quick high-level overview here. And it's basically they're going to be extending the planning permission deadlines on hundreds of construction projects. So where your permission would have expired, prior to the start of lockdown up to now, they're going to extend it until the 1st of April 2021. So a lot of people are falling into a trap where your planning permission has normally got to be exercised in 3 years, and they haven't been able to do that because of the coronavirus and lockdown. So the government's extending it to 2021, April next year. Now, people might say, well, so what? I haven't got a project at the moment. No, but actually, not everyone will know this. Not everyone is as savvy to get out there and get this information. So you might actually find that you could pick up an interesting project from someone where the planning permission has lapsed. They're not aware that this has been extended because they might not have a decent architect or planning consultant to tell them, in which case you might be going to offer them on the basis that it's got no planning, but you know that it's got planning extended to 2021. That's a very interesting little thing that you could take advantage of in the coming months. There's various other things on there they're looking to do. They're trying to speed up the pace of the planning appeal process, and they're targeting to get it down from 47 weeks to 23. Way hey!
Isn't that amazing? So from 1 year down to just 6 months, yes. And it will fly by, isn't it? Wow. I think actually, though, to be fair, we did talk on a previous show about some of the other things that are in the pipeline for the planning reforms that are going to come out with this planning white paper. So hopefully that's just the tip of the iceberg. There will be some other. The government's already said that one of their key focuses is to drive down the amount of time it takes stuff to go through planning. And a big part of that is actually resourcing up the planning teams, because we know that's a key area at the moment where there's a challenge. There's just simply not enough bums on seats in the planning departments to be able to get these things looked at, and that's why they drag on and on. So good that they've got this out, but we're still waiting to get the white paper and see what comes of that. I actually thought that wasn't the news you were going to talk about. I thought you were going to talk about the equally exciting news today, the landmark day that we'd all been waiting for. Depending on your, in fact, a double whammy today, 4th of July, pubs and haircuts.
Oh yes,
and I'll be honest, I don't know what to do first. It's gonna. I've got a few days to think about it, clearly, but yeah.
Well, if I was you, I'd get your haircut first. I would definitely get that first. That's definitely what he's doing. Guys, a few other people just logging on. Rob's just logged on. Pardeep's logged on. Good evening to you guys. And Dom and Alison, who can't see us, they said, please describe your outfits for those of us that can't see. Ritchie, have you got one of those strappy heels on? No, I haven't. I've got a traditional blue check shirt. And Ian, would you like to describe your outfit to Dom?
It's a pale blue shirt with, yeah, that's probably about the...
Pale blue shirt is good enough. Right, let's get on with this. Now, some of you who tune into this show regularly may have heard me mention once or twice Ian's new book, which is all about how you can make better use of your time and start to get your life back. This one here, okay? Now, given that Mr. Child, well, you know, he's done a lot of research on this subject, I thought maybe it'd be interesting this evening to find out what he thinks are the 5 biggest mistakes that he sees people make when it comes, you know, to time. So come on, let's just see. This is your chance now. I've got a list here of your top 5, but I'll need you to fill in the details because I haven't got a clue. So are you ready? Are you okay to go for this? Who's up for this to see Ian's description of his top 5 mistakes? Give us a wave, please, if you are. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, Ian. So the first point is you say that people don't value their time enough. What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, I think the problem about valuing time is that kind of time just happens. So we can't do anything about it. We can't kind of speed it up or slow it down. And worst of all, you know, we can't take some of Monday morning and stick it on the end of Saturday night, which obviously a big shame. But the result of all of that is that we kind of just take it all for granted. So, you know, life just happens and time just happens irrespective. And there are even times when we kind of find ourselves thinking, do you know what, we need to kill some time, which, you know, you think, what does that mean? Well, it's kind of like yeah, what I want to do is I want to get rid of some of my life so that I can get to the next good bit. But of course, when you're only here for whatever it is, 80 trips around the sun, kind of seems a bit daft. Surely it'd make more sense to find some kind of more good bits to fit in the time that you do have, rather than have fewer good bits and wish away the time in between. So one of the interesting kind of ways of looking at time in this context is the way in which billionaires look at time, because of course they don't worry so much about money like the rest of us. They've got that bit sorted. So of course the thing that they value above everything else is time. And there's a great story which I do mention in the book about an interview between Bill Gates, or involving Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, where Bill Gates prompts the interviewer to ask Warren Buffett to show him his diary and his appointment book. And in the month of April, I think he had something like 3 appointments. And Warren Buffett's response was, you think I might be the busiest guy in the world because I'm the richest? Actually, complete opposite. I value my time so greatly that actually it's a real issue, real challenge for me to actually put stuff in the diary, because it means I'm taking time away from myself. So it's funny, most people don't kind of work that way. And I think the other thing is because we wake up every morning and it just sort of happens, and we just take it for granted. So one of the things that I think is a bit of an eye opener is when you get a situation, I think we often hear of people who perhaps have that thing we all fear of, kind of going to the doctor and getting some bad news and being told that perhaps their life isn't quite as long as they were hoping. And then of course a lot of those people in that circumstance actually go out and achieve as much as possible in the time they've got left. They kind of go on a mission to kind of knock all those things off the bucket list, because they know that they've got a very finite time in which to do it. But of course, the weird thing here is that there isn't anybody listening to this that doesn't have a finite amount of time to do it. But for some reason, we're not kind of doing that. So, the trick is to give yourself a bit of a wake-up call now and again. Realize that you only have a finite amount of time to kind of do all those things that you want to do.
Okay, so that's valuation of time. Number 2, I know on your list is, I think, something that will resonate with most people, which is procrastination. So tell me a bit about that.
Well, I think most people, frankly, it will resonate with. That most people suffer from procrastination to some degree or another, and we don't always know that we're doing it. We've kind of got this uncanny knack of sort of knocking off the most difficult or unpleasant tasks, or sort of putting them off until the last possible minute. And then we do this bizarre thing where we give ourselves, we try and kid ourselves, and we kind of create these excuses as to why we've not done it. And then, even though we're only telling ourselves that, it's only an excuse for ourselves, and then we kind of feel better about kind of not doing it. Now, I'll be honest, we had quite a few people contact us about doing some mindset stuff and on procrastination in particular. So I have got a little session that we can do on procrastination, because I've got some tips that can help solve it. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to cover that on another day. So basically you're putting it off, isn't that procrastination? Come on. Yeah, technically, but no, there's some great tools that you can use to get rid of it, and I promise that it won't take long before I give you my top 5 anti-procrastination tools. I will not put it off for long.
Okay. Look, excellent. So number 3 on the list, distractions. Maybe that's just me interrupting you every now and then, but what sort of distractions are we talking about here?
Well, I think in your case, mainly Auto Trader and Top Gear, probably the biggest culprits. But I think for most people, there's loads. Social media is a big one. It's quite amazing how much time we actually spend on social media, and we're kind of addicted to it. We sort of worry that we worry about what people think of us, and of course what we might be missing out. So we kind of do spend several hours a day looking at social media, and that includes kind of the news as well. And the news is not great. Don't get me started on the news. That's a different topic in and of itself. But what we want to be trying to do is kind of absorb the key information. And kind of at the moment, you do need to absorb the news, because there's quite a lot going on that is relevant to kind of the lives that we lead. But of course, we don't then need to kind of dive into all of the other stories maybe the human interest stories that go around it. It's really easy to do. You sort of start looking for the headlines, wondering when exactly can I have a haircut, and then before you know it, you're reading about all sorts of stories all over the world that actually, you know, and an hour has flown by. So whether you're doing that online or you're doing it using you know, social media, the same thing kind of applies. So just you really need to kind of narrow that down and just consume the bare bones of it. We've got things like apps on our phone, and you know, the ones with the like the fruit type of things, where, you know, the puzzle type things, and of course we get this dopamine hit every time we kind of clear a level, so it all becomes hugely addictive, and we just keep playing them. Again, just massive waste of time. So I think it's kind of really important just to kind of recognize what we're doing. Some of those things can be great to be a kind of temporary distraction, but actually they can really take their toll in terms of the amount of time available. And when we add it up, it's a big number. And so it doesn't take much. I mean, that's the good news. It doesn't take much to kind of turn it down. I think the other thing about the news that I would say, which is the only thing I would say about the news, is that it's generally not positive. So what kind of happens when we absorb it is it kind of engages with our fight or flight mechanism, our sort of amygdala. We react to it, and even though it's not a violent reaction, at the end of the day, your brain, your subconscious, is thinking, well, what do I need to do? Does it affect me? Should I take any action? Is it something that's going to affect me or somebody that I care for? What are the things that could happen that could be negative for me? So all that goes on whilst you're listening to an article or reading an article, and then of course 2 minutes later you're on to the next one, and it thinks, well, I haven't quite finished with the last one yet, but now I'm hearing about something else that's negative. So all of that kind of does take a bit of a toll on your state of mind, and it can be the cumulative effect of that can be quite depressing. So giving news a wide berth, I would say.
So what's the solution for that? How can people avoid all of these distractions?
Well, I'll be honest, the easiest way is to go cold turkey. So the way I recommend people do it, because there isn't really there's no easy way, is basically just commit to going without them for 30 days. You know, just say 30 days, because 30 days, if it's terrible and you realize that you just can't live without it, 30 days is not a lifetime. It's not the end of the world. You can do it for 30 days, but it is enough time for you to appreciate the benefits. So if you do it, if you give up social media for 30 days, and you'll see what happens. You'll see how much time you get back and what you can do with it. I wouldn't recommend getting the time back and then watching the news or playing an app, but do something constructive with it. But then also, you know, you've kind of got it's not too long to wait if you find a desperate craving. So the light is always the light at the end of the tunnel. But that's quite a big one, because when you look at the numbers, and the numbers are online, you know, they regularly update the amount of time we spend on doing those things, particularly social media, and it is scary. It's a big number. So you can make quite a big dent and get quite a lot of your time back just by doing that.
Okay, let's have a look at number 4 then. Let's move this on. What about outsourcing? I know that's a big thing, isn't it?
Outsourcing is huge, actually. Yeah. So if a job's worth doing, obviously do it yourself. No, that's not what we do. If a job's worth doing, you want to get somebody else to do it if you can. So we're actually really lucky today, because we've got this kind of global network of outsourcing talent that's available to us that we can kind of tap into really easily. There's lots of portals such as Upwork and People Per Hour, Fiverr.com. You know, these are places where you can find people who will do work for you, and you can either opt to have people do work, you know, that are based in the UK, or they can be based overseas. It can be really, really cost effective. The trick behind it is to basically look at every task that you do work-wise, and kind of ask yourself, you know, is it something that could be done by someone else? Now, in the book, I tell you how to do that at work if you've got a day job, how to do that if you're running a business as well. So, for example, if you're in property, and quite often it's possible to do it really cost effectively if you do go overseas. So if you use outsourcing solutions, that through the same portals, but people that are based in other parts of the world, things like Philippines and India, really can be cost effective, because of course the cost of living over there is lower. So you can still pay them a good wage, but they get the work done cheaper than somebody over here. And the other benefit, of course, is that they get the work done while you're asleep. So it's ready for you when you wake up, due to the different time zones.
I like that. And I know you're really keen on personal outsourcing, aren't you?
I am, yeah. So it's one of the things that we don't do very well is kind of ascribe, I guess, a value to our own time. So if we would think of it as being a luxury if we went out and got a cleaner or a gardener, because we'd think, well, we can do those jobs for free. So I'm sort of paying, it's lazy. I'm just paying money that actually maybe I haven't got to get somebody in to do a job that I could do for free. But of course, it's not free. If you pay a cleaner £15 an hour to do, I don't know, 3.5 hours cleaning a week that you could do yourself, then of course what you've done is you've just got back half a day of your time for just 50 quid. And if you had half a day a week to move your business forward, or work something towards your goals, would you be able to, would that business be able to make more than £50? Well, of course it would. The problem is that it's not an immediate repayment. So you're seeing the money going out today, but of course your half a day is investing in a business that's going to produce the reward further downstream. It's the same with shopping. Online shopping is another great one. The supermarket shopping. If it costs £5 to get your supermarket to basically, you order it online and they deliver it. Back in the day when you could actually get a slot because they were actually taking on new customers. But so instead of doing the weekly shop, which might take you a couple of hours, you pay a £5 and you get the 2 hours back. So that values your time at £2.50 an hour. So, and that was a wake-up call for me, because I remember back in the day, a long time ago now, somebody that was mentoring me said, how much do you value your time? What's your hourly rate? And I'll tell you, I didn't come up with £2.50, but they quite eloquently proved that actually that's what I was valuing it at, because I was doing a weekly shop where I could have spent a £5 and got at least 2 hours back. So it's kind of that mindset shift that you just need to make. It's about placing a value on your own time. Something which ultimately, as far as your kind of goals and aspiration and maybe your business is concerned, your property business, it's kind of priceless, and kind of making it your first thought to see if somebody else could do it, rather than just if you remember.
Yeah, no, I think the personal outsourcing is massive if you can get it right. Okay, let's move on to my favorite, number 5, so the fifth and final one, which is that people make the mistake of thinking that the future actually exists. And I mean, that sounds like it could be a little bit controversial, Mr. Child. So perhaps you could shed a little light on this one for us, your fifth.
Yeah, this is your favourite, is it?
Yeah.
That's good. It's good to have favourites. So yeah, the future doesn't exist. Well, I mean, it's actually quite simple. If you think about it, the future is basically just an imagined version of what the present's going to look like at some future date, when we get there. So it's basically just a projection. And in the same way the past doesn't exist, that's just simply a recollection of what the present used to look like. So if we're used to thinking of things in the terms of the past, the present, and the future, but of course the present is like the only one of those three that actually exists. The other two are just imagined or remembered versions of the present. So does that make sense so far?
Well, yeah, I'm with you, but I'm not sure about everyone else.
So if we think that the present's the only thing that exists, the problem is that we do spend an awful lot of our time, a lot of the present, working towards the future. We worry about the future quite a lot. When we go to work, what are we doing? We're earning money and we're creating wealth that we're not going to spend today. We're spending it in the future. When we go to school, or we go to university, or when we do some training, when we get trained on some new skills or whatever, then the benefit that we reap from that is all in the future, because we'll be able to get a better job, be able to earn more money, and of course that's what we're going to spend in the future. And of course we spend quite a lot of time planning for the future as well, you know, things that we're going to do, goals and things we're going to achieve and so on. And of course, all of that isn't in itself a problem. You know, you want to do that because you don't want to just kind of blow everything today and live for today, because tomorrow it could be a very different situation. So we do need to plan for it. But I think the problem is that for too many of us, you know, tomorrow kind of never gets there. When we eventually get to that future date, whenever it was, you know, guess what? We find that we're still working and we're still worrying about the future, and we never actually make that sort of conscious point of enjoying the present for what it is. And some people might say, well, you know, retirement is when we finally stop worrying about the future. You know, that's where all of the work that we've done and the financial resources that we built up, that's when it allows us to, you know, that chance to enjoy the present. But, you know, it doesn't really sound like a great deal, does it? Imagine if somebody said to you when you were born, right, I want you to spend the first 65 years worrying about the future so that you can then eventually spend whatever time you've got left actually enjoying your life.
That could be a difficult sell, I would imagine.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So the thing that I think we just need to do is to make that conscious effort to enjoy the present now. I mean, we can't stop worrying about the future. We certainly can't stop working towards it, but we kind of need to remember that, yeah, you know, today is yesterday's tomorrow. So, you know, whatever age you are now, I'm sure there would have been a time when, you know, 10 years ago, you might have thought, well, I wonder what I might be doing in 10 years time and how life would look like. Well, guess what? You know, we're now 10 years on, and I suspect you might still be worrying about what's going to happen in 10 years time. And I remember Steve Jobs once said quite famously about if today was the last day of his life, would he want to do what he's about to do today? And he said, whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, he just said, I know then that I need to change something. So I think it's not about not planning for the future. It's just about giving yourself a break. And whatever you do, just make sure you take the time to enjoy life today, and just stop always worrying about tomorrow. Yeah, make the most of the journey.
Excellent. So there you go. There is Ian's top 5 sort of biggest mistakes that he sees people make when it comes to time. Anthony's put a question in. How can you choose the right person for outsourcing? Do you want to just a quick answer on that? Then we move into some more property stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're outsourcing, to be honest. So we've got outsourcing at work, and if you've got a day job, that's quite an interesting one. There's quite a lot of ways you can go there, but your mindset needs to be, how can I avoid doing it myself? And quite often, that's a case of delegating better. Delegating is definitely an underused way of outsourcing. And actually, you can quite often give it to other people to do. Maybe in other departments, sometimes even upwards, believe it or not. But most people don't actually, they worry more about giving away their job. Will I still be needed if I give away all the work? Yeah, you absolutely will. You will actually be working on much more exciting stuff. So that's kind of an internal thing. Linked to that, if it's your business, your property business, something that you're doing for yourself, it can also be using the resources, as I mentioned, things like Upwork, people per hour, getting access to people that are able to take on those tasks as outsources, I think is a very good way to go. You could employ somebody, full time and create a model where you actually have employees. That, funnily enough, is an area that a lot of business owners, they fail to take that step early enough. But actually, it comes with quite a bit of baggage, as you can imagine. So the outsourcing approach, I think, is quite good. There is a lot of information on all of those portals about the best way of recruiting in terms of what to look for. Personally, my view is, rather than trying to find people through looking at their CVs, I tend to just put up the job, whatever the description is, and see who responds. That's the easiest way for me, I think, to get a good flavor of people. And you'd be surprised, some people are really, really proactive. And then when it comes to outsourcing your life and the kind of stuff that you do in your home life, then that really is just a mindset thing. That's just beating yourself up and telling yourself, do you know what? I want to create some time for myself, and I can see that the value
But Anthony's question is, how do you find the right person? Not about doing it, it's finding the right people. How do you get that right person? How do you identify them?
Well, as I said, if you're going to be finding something for a business where you're using any of the portals, that's where.
What about privately?
Say again?
What about if you're doing it personally, you want to outsource personally? That's just a matter of some of the examples you've given, is choose the right shopping channels, choose the right taxi firm to take the kids to school, that type of thing, isn't it?
Get a gardener, get a cleaner. I mean, again, you want to, it's that sort of thing is generally word of mouth. I think where there is a technique to it, which is quite important, is when you're outsourcing tasks that are business related, particularly if they're your business, then you know, there are some decisions to make as to what part of the world you outsource to, what skill sets, and how you put out the advert, what sort of values you do. And again, most of those sites have got some really good information about how you should do that.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you, Ian. Hopefully, guys, that was useful. Right, let's pick up a couple of other questions that's coming in the week. And guys, you're more than welcome to submit questions. Just put it into our team, and they will, you know, it's an inquiries team. They will basically pick up your questions and let them have us for this evening, so we can answer them. Apologies to Debs and Richard. We had a question the other week, and I think we missed over that. We had it a couple of weeks on the list, and for some reason we didn't answer it. So apologies. We're going to answer it this evening. And Debs and Richard's question was, when making a planning application, what are the pros and cons of submitting a draft proposal for a pre-application inquiry? So I think there you're looking, your question, I'm guessing, Debs and Richard here, is what's the pros and cons of a pre-app or not a pre-app, okay, or full planning? Because that's really your choice, okay? So if you're going to go in for a pre-app, that is what it says. It's a pre-application. It's not a full application. And the principle is that the council will, the planning officer will give you a response. They will give you a comment to say, yes, in principle, we like what you're doing, or no, we don't, okay? It's that initial inquiry, just for them to give you an initial bit of feedback. Now, that is all well and good. It can take as long. It's probably a little bit cheaper, okay, than doing a full application, but it can take as long. And the problem is as well, it hasn't got any substance to it. So there've been many instances where pre-apps have been done, and on that basis, you go, well, that's great. The council said in principle they're happy for us to do this development, this conversion, this new build or whatever, and then they go for the full application and it gets thrown out and it gets rejected. And so, well, hang on, it's a pre-app. But well, the pre-app doesn't guarantee you success. Now, different architects, different planning consultants will have different views on this. And there's often the question, should I choose a local planning consultant? Should I choose one that's nationally based? This is where the advantage of having someone locally on board comes into play, because they will probably know the appetite for the local authority. Now, there are definitely some planning officers who will actually say, yeah, no, definitely put a pre-app in. Some councils say we want everything on a pre-app, okay, and we will process it that way. Other local authorities, some people will say, waste of time. Doesn't tell you anything. It's not going to, they're not going to stand by it. Doesn't get you any quicker. Let's just go for a full application on the basis they have to refuse it. We talked about appeals earlier, but they might refuse it and tell us exactly why they refuse it. So rather than have to go through this 47, maybe 23-week appeal process, is actually we can just say, right, we'll address those issues. Could be a highways issue, could be a noise issue, could be anything. So at least you would get a formal response, which if you then address those issues, in theory, you've now got a planning approval. Whereas a pre-app, you can do that same process and then argue that, well, we've just responded to what you said on the pre-app. And they say, well, the pre-app, just the pre-app. So it's a bit of an odd one. Personally, I'd say I wouldn't bother unless a planning consultant was telling me in my area that really that is the way you should be doing it, because the planning officer said he wants everything on a pre-app. I would say I'd go for a full application, get in, get a formal response, and then respond to that accordingly. Debs and Richard, hopefully that was useful in answering that question for you, and apologies that took a little bit longer. Okay, we've got a question here from Richard that's come in this week. Dear A-Team, that's us, excellent.
It's us. Good.
He says, what's your thoughts on the very upbeat five-year forecast, put my teeth in, from Savills when the Bank of England feels we're in for the greatest recession in 300 years? Okay, so Savills have done some recent reports where they're quite upbeat on the 5-year forecast. And as he says, the Bank of England are saying, well, hang on, you've got a huge recession coming. So what's our thoughts on that? Ian, do you want to pick that one up? A bit of response to Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whilst there's a link, they are slightly different things. I think the 300-year thing is kind of harking back to, funny enough, 300 years ago, when I think it was, we had GDP effectively fall by about 15% in a year, and I think we're now projecting it, Bank of England's projecting it to be 14%. So, you know, we've had this massive dip, I think, you know, 30% in the first half of 2020. So that's one thing. And so statistically, yes, it will be the worst year for, you know, for 300 years in terms of output. But it doesn't automatically follow that you know, house prices, the housing market is going to suffer, you know, by the same degree. I think the other thing to say is that there's clearly a connection, but there's lots of different analysts giving some quite different views at the moment. I think Savills up from memory, I think they kind of well, they were talking about 7.5% reduction in 2020. And then quite interestingly, they were pointing to some regional variations in terms of when things are likely to bounce back. But they certainly had, you know, it was a very positive picture if you look at it over 5 years. I think there are certainly some commentators that are saying that, yeah, there's probably between 5 and you know, 11–12% this year in terms of a decline, and that yes, it's likely to take a little longer than the analysts first expected for it to recover. So we'll be into 2022 potentially by the time we get back into where things were. One of the things that's driving all that uncertainty is, of course, exactly that. People don't know. There's the elephant in the room is unemployment. We're going to see a significant, you know, uplift in unemployment, and that actually is one of the things I think that is quite a big difference between what the Bank of England are expecting and what basically the Savills report is basing its data on. A company called Oxford Economics, who do their own data, and I think the numbers seem to be kind of different. So unemployment for the Bank of England is peaking next year 9%, which is about 1.5 million people, and Oxford Economics for about 6.5%. So there's kind of a difference there. But even so, Bank of England are quite bullish about, you know, this V-shaped recovery. They still think things are going to bounce back. So I think that when the Bank of England talked about that 300-year event, at the time they did have some, you know, there was a certain amount maybe of shock tactics there. In particular, they were very keen in trying to persuade the banks to continue lending. They saw that there was a big challenge if the banks got a bit scared, the high street banks, and stopped lending to people. They saw that was, you know, they had to make that continue. So that was kind of on their radar at that point in time. Yeah, things, I guess, arguably sort of changed a little bit. And even the Savills report is, because the lockdown has continued a bit more than they originally thought, it is less bullish perhaps than it was. But I don't think they're necessarily out of kilter. I think that there is, that there's slightly different things, and only one of them can print money, which I'm sure will ease things going forward. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of that.
Richard, hopefully that's answered your question. And again, you've got to make your own, as an entrepreneur, you've got to make your own opinion of how you think this recovery is going to be, when you buy, when you're going to put something in the market for sale. But read as much as you can. Yeah, ask these questions, and we'll do our best to try and give you an opinion of them. But I think the circumstances are so unusual here at the moment that a potentially quite quick recovery is certainly potentially on the cards. Richard says, yes, great, thank you. Nice to get other people's opinion. Richard, we're happy to give it. And Debs and Richard said just now, we answered the question on pre-apps. Thank you. I cannot see the point of a pre-app, so useful answer. Yeah, Debs, as I say, speak to your planning consultant, have a chat with them in terms of what they perceive in the area you're looking at, because some areas it's definitely worth doing. So you need to have a look at that. Okay, just popping back up, interesting comment from Yvonne this evening. We were talking about this extension. Where's her comment up here? Let me just find it. Yep, from the from the government. So guys, some of you guys I know joined a little bit later, some announcements from the government where if you've got a planning approval which has run out during lockdown, it's going to get extended, so you can actually still go and build these things up to April 2021. And Yvonne said that's great news for her today. She's an architect, actually got an architectural practice, and that benefits 2 of her clients. She's actually a student of ours as well. So Yvonne, that's great. That's great news there. Okay, Edward's got a question. Edward, good evening to you. I trust you are well this evening. Edward's still on. Just want to make sure you're still on, Edward. Edward's question is, when a title plan looks to be wrong, what can be done to have it corrected? He saw one today and the red line goes over the neighbour's house. Well, you own the neighbour's house, Edward. That's fine. Just knock on that door and tell them to move out because you own it. Edward, you have to go through a process there of getting that corrected. You need to find out why it's gone wrong. The problem with title plans is normally they're done with a great big thick felt tip, relatively, and you know they're never that accurate. If you go back to some of the very historic ones, it's very difficult to do. What you can do is actually get a measured survey. So if it needs to be fairly accurate, then you could get a measured survey done of the exact plot you were looking to have and agree that with the neighbours, because it should be fairly obvious, presumably you're looking at something here to purchase, of what you would own and what the neighbours would own. Should be probably no dispute over that, assuming we're talking about the building. You know, clearly you haven't got furniture in their building and they haven't got it in yours, and there's a solid wall. So there shouldn't be any dispute over that, but it's worth doing a measured survey. There are trigonometry points around the country which you can measure these off, or you can measure it off other buildings. If you're lucky enough to have, I don't know, a church or something, you know, renowned in the area, or a railway station that you can measure off of, you can set against that and then say, these are my levels. Or indeed the highway, you can measure off the highway and set it out. So yeah, we own up to 10 meters here. This is the width. And you can do that, and then you can actually then resubmit that to Land Registry as an amendment. The difficulty comes if it's a boundary and then you start getting disputes. But what you want to have a look at there, this comes from the previous owner, and you want to get the previous owner just to confirm in writing. They normally do this through the solicitors, that they've never had any dispute on the positioning of that boundary in the 20, 30 years that they've been there. That's normally enough for you to get that changed over. But often you want to do it in consultation. What I would say though, Edward, go and have a look on Land Registry and see if the neighbour's building is actually equally incorrect, because you might find theirs is correct, it's only yours that's incorrect. So then you know it's probably not controversial. Hopefully that's answered that question. It's a solicitor's thing. Get your solicitor involved. Those that remember a few weeks ago, we had Paul Sams on from Dutton Gregory solicitor. I'm assuming you've got your own here, but if not, reach out to Paul. I'm sure he would help you on something like that. His details will be on the YouTube, on the show notes from that show. So hopefully that's answered.
Edward says it looks like they sneezed when drawing the line, so I'm sure the assistant will be able to clear that one up. And Richard actually says, could it be a flying freehold? So that's where you've got one property that effectively, for example, owns a bit of the first floor, and another property owns a bit of the ground floor, one above the other. And of course, generally, quite often that is actually pointed out on the deeds, but not always. So I guess it could be.
Yeah, just have a read of it and see what you think. Great answer, thanks, says Edward. No problem at all. Okay, let's have a look, see what we've got here. Josh has got a question in. Just conscious of time, guys, let's squeeze a couple more in. I apologise, never going to get them all done, but Josh has got a question here. Is there a drawdown process for development stage payments, and what is involved? Yes, there is. So Josh, here, if you're looking at development and you've got development funders, assuming you've got commercial funders in place, there will be stage payments, okay? Generally monthly in arrears. So the contractor will have to fund that work, and then the process in very simple terms, I'm going to give you a reasonably quick answer this evening, is that what will happen is the project manager, quantity surveyor, with the contractor will do a valuation for the month. They value the cost of the works on the site, possibly any materials that can be secured as yours, okay? They value all of that. That will get drawn up in what's called a valuation. Then the bank's surveyor will come down to site on an agreed time once a month, walk the site, read the valuation, which hopefully you want to pre-prepare, but these are important things to know how to do all this stuff. Agree the valuation, go back, sign it off, pass that through to the bank. The bank sends out the check ideally to you. There's a little catch. Sometimes the bank sends it to your solicitors. You need to make sure you get that boxed off at the beginning, otherwise there's another few days delay. And of course, then you pay the contractor. So there is a drawdown process, and it's normally monthly, and that's on the basis, but it's on the basis of the value of the works. It's not like they're going to give you 20% now, another 20, etc., etc. And it's always paid in arrears. Okay, there are some ways on funding they might give you something up front, but generally this comes in arrears. Josh, hopefully that's answered that question for you. Okay, let's have a look here. Let's get this one as the last one, guys. We'd like to try and get you guys away just after 1:45. So Sarah, you are the lucky one this evening. So Sarah, good evening to you. She says, what's the advantage of conversion projects over new builds? That's not a quick question, is it? Okay, Sarah. Right, try and do this one reasonably quickly. So there's pros and cons. Now, a lot of people, you'll find a lot of existing developers go, I just want to do new build. And the reason is because they got stung on a refurb. And then you'll have some developers who go, I just want to do refurb because they got stung on a new build. Okay. Now, where do you get caught out? Well, a new build, you get caught out in the ground. That's the problem. There's not much land left in this country that's completely fresh that we can go and build on, particularly when the smaller developments that we would be looking at on a sort of small scale development, which is generally where we teach our students. So in those places, you're often looking at brownfield land. You're looking at recycling some land that presumably had something on it. So your risk is in the ground. What's in there? What was there? Was there an ancient well? You might think, God, ancient well. And the amount of times I've had ancient wells on sites and they're right in the middle of foundations, and suddenly there's another 4, 5, 6 grand gone straight out the window in cost. And of course, it slows you up. So, what was there? Existing foundations? Was there any contamination? Now, all those things. And of course, the weather affects it. It's hammering with rain and all the tide trenches fall in. So until you get out the ground, you haven't got cost certainty. So what a lot of developers don't like is that uncertainty in the ground, okay? And by the time they come out the ground, they've got a small proportion, maybe 20% of the cost expended, but they've overrun on the whole project by, half of their contingency. That's the problem it can be with new build. They've got more certainty as the rest of the building goes up, and that goes up reasonably quickly. So there's the sort of pros and cons of new build. If we look at refurb, well, you don't have so many problems in the ground, but caveat that depends whether you're putting additional extensions on or foundations and drainage, but obviously it's a smaller proportion of overall excavation. So largely you've got a building that exists, okay? And of course, though, with that, you may uncover stuff. So people that's got stung on a refurb say, well, we've uncovered loads of problems, and then there's all these rotten timbers or rusted steelwork or deteriorated concrete. Yes, you can get all these things which can cause you issues. What I'd say is actually on balance, I think a refurb to some extent, and this is an opinion, is perhaps less risky depending on how you go about it. And a lot of that is to do a two-stage contract where you go in and you strip out the building and then you identify all the problems before you price it. So it's not always the fact that there's a few extra works here or there for some rotten timbers. It's the fact that sometimes it comes in whilst you're in contract with the contractor, and then he's not got a license to print money because there's a contract, JCT contract in place which would control him, but actually to an extent he has, they've got you over a barrel, you can't do much about it. Whereas if you uncover it, they are going to be pricing in a little bit of, so they won't be pricing in risk, and of course, it will all get caught up in one big negotiation. Pros and cons of both, choose which one you prefer. Generally, I say refurb gets you down the road a bit quicker. So, guys, look, it's just gone 1:45. We'd like to get you away. In fact, it's coming up to 10:02. So hopefully you have enjoyed this evening's show. Ian, thank you for that. That was really good. We put them on the spot this evening. So, guys, take those on board. Don't go out and waste any more time. So that's it for the show. Now, if you've got any friends, we'd love to keep growing this community. We get more and more new people on. So please come and invite them to the show. We'd love that. It's totally free. This is just what we do. We'll give you straight, honest answers. Obviously, please share us on social media. If you like what we do, put any comments out there, share it in your groups. That would be much appreciated. And if you are new to us and you're not in our Facebook group, we have a Facebook group, Business Owners Creating Wealth Through Property Development, and you're more than welcome to come into that. It's a private group. But if you just put that forward, connect up with us, and we'll see if we can get you in there. So that's Business Owners Creating Wealth Through Property Development. So there we go.
We have a guest, don't we? We've got a guest on Saturday.
We have. So that's the end of today's show. The Saturday show is coming up. And we have a guest coming in. We have a structural engineer coming in. You guys asked us to bring a structural engineer along. It's one of the people you've asked us to do, so you can quiz them. I mean, we could talk about that, pros and cons of new build and existing. So if that's something you want to hear from the horse's mouth, as it were, let's see what a structural engineer has to say, someone who's out there practicing this stuff day in, day out. So we've got a guy coming in, a chap called Derek Mason. He's coming in on Saturday to answer your questions. So we look forward to that. Guys, let us know if you've liked today's show. Always put it in the chat box. People always let us know, so we're always pleased to hear of that. And yes, thanks, Jap, says Gavin. Anthony says, thanks, guys. And apologise if we didn't answer all your questions. Come along on Saturday and throw them in the box, and we'll see what we can do then. Mansour says, thanks and have a great evening. Ranjit from Property Investor News says, thank you, lovely people. Oh, that must be us. Thank you very much. Thank you, says Yvonne. And Richard says, very good. Thanks, guys. Evening all. And Dominic and Perrin, who said they couldn't see us. Only it's not, honestly, she said, they say it's not true what they say about you both. I think you're the best. We think you're the best as well. And gracias, says Michael.
Hey, the Italian's coming on. Wow, you've been practicing, haven't you? Be honest.
Right.
Yeah, I've been practicing.
See you later, guys. See you Saturday.
Take care.
Bye-bye.